Hi, welcome to my office. I'm Allison. I'm the speech language pathologist that worked with Carolyn over the past few days evaluating her speech and language.
Oh, okay. I'm Carolyn's mom. Thank you for scheduling this meeting.
Thank you for coming. I wanted to meet today to go over the evaluation results that I found with Carolyn. Carolyn is very cooperative and was very hardworking throughout all of the testing. She exhibited strong language skills. On the preschool language scale test of the 5th edition, she received a standard score of 102. This assessment was a subtest or a mini section of the full assessment to assess just how she uses her language to communicate. So, creating sentences, describing things, all the things necessary to communicate her wants, needs, and ideas to others. And she performed in the 55th percentile for this assessment. So that is within normal limits for her age. It was noted that she was a little difficult to understand during this assessment, so I went ahead and administered another assessment to really look a little bit deeper at her speech production skills. I administered the clinical assessment of articulation and phonology, 2nd edition. She received a standard score of 55, and that was within the 1st percentile. So that's a little below average for her age. Going back and looking at this assessment and analyzing her productions, it was noted that she presents patterns of cluster reduction, stopping, and pre-vocalic voicing. So these are patterns of her errors, and we as SLPs call those phonological patterns. So cluster reduction, that occurs when an individual has difficulty producing the two consonants that occur in the same position of a word. For example, the word spot. An individual with cluster reduction would have difficulty producing both the S and the P in the word spot. So they might reduce it, cluster reduction, to sot or pot instead of spot. Stopping is when an individual takes a specific phoneme or sound and substitutes it for the intended sound. And then lastly, pre-vocalic voicing is when a phoneme before the vowel within a word or a sound before the vowel is voiced when it should be voiceless. So, after administering that assessment, I did an oral mechanism exam to evaluate her oral structures, her face, her cheeks, her lips, and just making sure that everything is typical within her oral cavity, from her structures to her movement, and everything was typical. I also noted that her voice was typical for her age, and her fluency was also typical for her age. So, going forward, based on these assessment results, I would like to work on the long-term goal of increasing Carolyn's overall intelligibility to 80%. Intelligibility is when how well others can understand what you're saying. So if you are 100% intelligible, others can typically, most of the time, 100% of the time, understand what you are saying. If you are 50% intelligible, sometimes people can understand, but half of the time they cannot. And that really is what is impacting Carolyn's frustration, and that's what I want to work on with her, so she can really communicate to the best of her ability, because she has those strong language skills. She just needs to work on the speech production to be able to communicate what she needs. So, within 3 months, that's our time frame, I would like Carolyn to increase her overall intelligibility to 80%. And how we'll get there is by producing the targeted speech sounds in sentences without these patterns of errors or process errors, as I will refer to them as. And we're going to do this when she's presented a picture scene to narrate. And to master this goal, she's going to do it in 2 out of 3 trials within a therapy session. So that's our overall long-term goal. To achieve this long-term goal, I've created smaller little steps for us to get to this goal. So the first short-term objective is what I'm going to refer to them as, is imitating fricatives. This is a sound class. Those sounds that create like friction sounds. So an example is or the F phoneme for sound. And she will also imitate affricates. So these are the ch and j sounds without those process errors of stopping. Those are substituting a sound for another sound while naming pictures when presented with 90% accuracy. Her second goal will be to correctly produce these same sounds listed before in words with 90% accuracy when presented a picture. So we're going from imitating, where I will produce it and I'll ask her to produce it right after me, imitating me. And then we're going to go a step further and correctly producing them in words when naming a picture. The third short-term objective will be that Carolyn will imitate consonant clusters. Those are those 2 consonants together that sometimes are reduced, and Carolyn presented with cluster reduction, only producing 1 of the sounds in the consonant cluster. So she's going to imitate consonant clusters in words when presented a picture with 80% accuracy. So those 3 short-term goals will help us in achieving the long-term goal for Carolyn. So, with that being said, do you have any questions so far?
Okay, so that all sounds really great. I'm just thinking now, like, what's the next step to do to start getting these services going?
Great question. So, I'm so excited that you're so eager to start the services. So after this meeting, and when we go over everything, I'll just have you sign some documents. We'll send it to submit to the IEP team. Everything will be finalized, and then we will schedule Carolyn for services, and we'll start working on these short-term goals. And every once in a while, you will get a progress report of how Carolyn's doing. And then at the end, you will get a full, more detailed report of how Carolyn did over a longer span. So that usually comes out with report cards. So once everything is done here and we get services started, you'll get smaller reports, bigger reports, and then you can always contact me by email, phone, everything, to ask me any questions on how Carolyn is doing.
Okay, perfect. And before services start, is there anything I can do at home?
Yes, great question. So it is a great idea to work on things at home while supplementing the therapy that Carolyn will receive with her speech therapist. So one thing that you can do at home is starting to model correct production of speech production. You can encourage Carolyn to slow down her rate of speech and really focus on how she's producing her speech sounds to tell others what she means. That will help with the frustration aspect that Carolyn is experiencing when she can't get her message across to others. So modeling your speech sounds, and you can even emphasize them if there's ones that you notice that she really has trouble with during a specific conversation, and also encouraging her to slow down and really really focus on her production.
Awesome.
Great, so we'll get everything signed here and we'll be ready to start services. Does that sound good to you?
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for meeting.